Let's look at a common example of price floors, binding price floors, which we think might be the American minimum wage law. This law varies from state to state. From the federal level, it is set at $7.25 an hour, so a worker can't earn less than that. In the 2014 State of the Union, the president had suggested to Congress increasing the federal minimum wage for federal workers to $10.10 an hour, and it really began a discussion of, well, what would a $10.10 an hour minimum wage for all workers look like? So I want to take a look at that story real quick from a local Indianapolis news perspective, and then we'll come back together and finish off the analysis of price floors.
I will issue an executive order requiring federal contractors to pay their federally funded employees a fair wage of at least $10.10 an hour, because if you cook our troops' meals or wash their dishes, you should not have to live in poverty.
Those words that you heard right here on RTV6 during the President's State of the Union address have sparked a national debate.
The President is calling on Congress to raise the federal minimum wage for all workers. And tonight, legislators here in Indiana are making the same plea. RTV6 reporter Tanya Spencer has more details on this hotly debated legislation.
I just can't see how I can keep the business going with the amount of employees that I have and give the raise to each and every one of them.
Sandy Trent's Helping Hand chauffeur service isn't just her business, it's her calling. 85% of her clients are sick children and seniors who need transportation to and from hospitals.
Some of those long distance, like Crawfordsville to Indianapolis, Riley.
She has 10 vans and 12 part-time employees, and she says a forced increase in the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10 an hour would force her 20-year-old business to fold.
With the amount of employees that I have, the change, that would make $2,500 a week. That's $10,000 a month, and sometimes that is what I make bi-monthly. How am I going to? There is no way. I am a paycheck-to-paycheck business as well as people are paycheck-to-paycheck people. It will kill my business. These people lose a job. They're not going to have any place to go. It's just a domino effect.
But those trying to raise a family on minimum wage say an increase is well overdue.
We have thousands of Hoosier families who are struggling to make ends meet.
They rallied at the State House today, saying raising the minimum wage will pull some families out of poverty and improve the economy.
Workers, the people who drive the economy, don't have enough to spend. They don't have any extra cash to spend to go to a movie, buy a pizza, those sorts of things. So if we can pay people a little bit more, we're going to loosen up the economy and get things rolling again.
Although there's no timetable set just yet, Indiana's minimum wage bill will be brought up this legislative session. Reporting in Ladoga, Indiana, Tanya Spencer, RTV6.
And the Indiana bill to raise the minimum wage statewide is SB 327. It's currently awaiting a hearing.
So this was a local story from Indianapolis ABC affiliate following the State of the Union in 2014. And it's really interesting because it does a great job of kind of laying out both sides of the price floor minimum wage discussion that we have. So there's two things that were going on in that story. One was the woman who's the business owner, and she was kind of talking about unemployment that would result from having a price floor, from having to spend more money on her employees. And it sounds like it's not a very profitable business, and so she's saying, I can't really afford to pay these individuals more money, and if I have to, either one of two things will happen. I'm going to lay some of them off, or I will go out of business as a result. Down here, or kind of one of the last things that was being discussed was there was an individual from the Indiana legislature that was kind of going through and talking about how we should have the minimum wage increase because it's going to make those people who retain a job much better off. And that's what I was getting at down here. So let's say that you are a individual who would benefit from this. You would keep your employment. So you'd be making $10.10 an hour under the new federal minimum wage law. And let's say that you're working 40 hours a week, and you're working 50 weeks a year. You've got 2 weeks of vacation. And so if we just kind of do quick math on this, that would be 2,000 hours, making $10 an hour or so. We'd be looking at, kind of simple math here, we'd be looking at making an income of $20,000, right? And let's just compare that to the current federal minimum wage. And in Indiana, that's also what it is. It's $7.25. So that's why I'm using that number here. And so if we just do the exact same math, and you're making $7.25 an hour, you're working 50 weeks a year, and you're working 40 hours for each of those weeks, you're working full time. And if we do that math, I get 2,000 hours times $7.25, and I get like $14,500. And so this kind of gets to the main argument for increasing the minimum wage, which is if you are one of those individuals who will retain your job, you will be better off, right? You'll be better off by $5,500, almost $6,000, right? If we kind of take into account the little remainder there. And so you would have those individuals who retain a job much better off. And it's one of the reasons that there's wide support for increasing the minimum wage in America. But we also see kind of what that business owner was talking about as well. And what was she saying? I've kind of modeled it here. So if we have a price floor, what does that say? That you can't pay someone less than that. So anything less than this price is not allowed. Our equilibrium model would be at that lower price, right? And so what we would see is that you could only pay this amount. And this is the demand curve, right? She would be one of the businesses that demands labor. And so what we're saying is we would see some displacement. We would only have demand at that wage for low-skilled workers of this quantity. And so we would still have this amount of individuals who would find employment and would be much better off because they'd be making more money per hour. But what she was kind of getting at was this part in here, which is this is the area kind of up to the equilibrium, right, that we previously would have had, the quantity that we would have had jobs, or even at that, right, even at, if you want to take it very literally, even at that price of $10.10 way over here on the supply curve of individuals who would be willing to work there. But even if we just look at how much we would lose as a result of increasing the minimum wage, we would have kind of this level that we generally think of as unemployment. Unemployment here, right? And this is the displaced workers that she was kind of talking about, that she was saying I might have to lay people off as a result of that, or I might close down my business entirely. I might decide that I no longer want to be in this business. I'm going to go try to find something else to do with my time and my efforts and my money. There's a lot of discrepancy about how much employment there is here, and this is a simplified model. I'm not trying to imply that it would be that we would cut employment by half or anything like that, because it really depends on how inelastic demand and supply are, right? And what those really look like. What are some of the substitutes that we would have for employment? And do those exist? The more inelastic these are, the more vertical these curves are, we would imagine there would be much less unemployment as a result. And there's a lot of economists that argue that, right? That there would still be some displaced workers, but it wouldn't be that much, right? And those who would benefit are much better off. And so as a society, we should go ahead and increase the price floor. We should increase the minimum wage because those individuals would be better off. So we see kind of both of those in the argument. I just want to lay this out and see what that looks like in our model here. So hopefully you have a good feel for that. I'll just name a couple other things here that we want to take into consideration. One policy solution here, and I'll try to list these out. One policy solution would be instead of doing something where we would increase the price floor, and as a result this would be on really who would bear the cost. It would be consumers who would pay higher prices, and it would be kind of business owners that would possibly take kind of lower profits or maybe even exit industry together. We could look at some policies that would be like something like the earned income tax credit, where we would have some sort of tax credit where we pay, and I'll just write this out, where we would supplement the income from these individuals. So you would remain at this individual income, right? You would remain at this income, but then we would give some sort of welfare programs, or you would give some sort of supplemental income, or you would get much lower taxes that you would have to pay. And in fact, there's a very popular program, and I just mentioned it, right? It's the Earned Income Tax Credit, and that's a very popular tax credit that does a similar thing like this. And you often see a number of individuals who call for kind of expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit. There's some other policies that might take place, and I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier when I was talking about there might be some kind of short-term displacement in this market, because maybe you had previously individuals who were working in higher paying jobs and they were displaced from that work as a result of a depression or kind of recession, or maybe just normal kind of cyclical changes within the economy. So there might be some policies that would be very targeted towards individuals to help get them out of the low-skill work market completely, so that they're not even competing in this market. So we would have some sort of educational, right? It's kind of like educational retraining programs, they're often called. Retraining. And we often see this as a good solution for a number of individuals. The question really is kind of what is the cost of this, right? And who pays for these types of programs? And can we guarantee that there's a higher paying job on the other end? I'll just highlight, and there's a number of other policies that you could think about here. I'll just highlight one of the other things that we'll often see is that you won't necessarily see unemployment as a result of a higher price floor, but what we might also see would be in combination with some unemployment or some displaced employment, that some of these factors could change for individuals. So while your wage would go up and maybe you keep your job, we might see that you are no longer working full-time. Maybe your employer forces you towards part-time work. Or maybe as a result you can't find full-time work, you're looking at seasonal work here. So instead of working 50 weeks a year, maybe you're now only able to work seasonally during the summer or during the winter in a job like that. So again, one of the things that I'm looking for in this class, and hopefully that you'll have a good feel for, is when we see a story like that, when you, no matter what your preconceived kind of feelings are towards if we should increase the minimum wage or if we should not increase the minimum wage, what I hope is that you've got a good feel for the policy, that you've got a good feel for what will happen as a result, and think through, is this good, is this bad, who benefits more, and having a good feel for some of the arguments on the other side, either way that you come down on this issue.